Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share my complete garden plan for this upcoming season. I have big plans this year for not only my own small property here, but I have two brand new to me growing spaces that I'll be caring for this year as well. And one is actually located on one of my neighbors' properties. They have many acres, and they are planning to develop a fairly good-sized vegetable garden in the near future, but being more reasonable than I am. They are starting small and only growing a little bit. But they do want to develop this space, and knowing that I wanted more space, offered me a roughly 10 by 20 foot. I think that's the size of the spot. And that way I will keep it planted and weeded and taken care of, and that's a little bit less for them to do while still developing that garden space for their future use. That also gives me a big jump in production because I have a pretty tiny spot here. Our entire property is only about 1/3 of an acre here, and although I do plan on expanding my growing space here this year, I'm pretty limited in what I can do. So I have written down a bit of a plan for this space. I'm going to do 2 double rows of zinnias spaced about 1 foot apart, leaving a couple of feet in between. I'm going to do half nice bright colors and half pastel colors. I think the queen lime are sort of going to go in the middle. I have a lot of the queen lime mix, and I usually put those with the bright colors. But I'm also going to do some long rows of sunflowers. Once I see what the space looks like and the exact measurements, I might be able to tweak this a little bit, but I'm planning to direct seed 1 row every week for 4 weeks. And that's not enough sunflowers officially for my full season, but that's going to give me the bulk of them, and then I can fit whatever else I need here in my current growing space. Now, for my current growing space here on my property, I'm going to devote the entire thing to flowers this year. And that's because I just didn't have nearly enough last season. But I really do love growing vegetables, and that is where my other new space comes in. And that one also is not my space. This space is at the local elementary school where my kids have gone. My youngest still goes there, and they have a really lovely garden space with 26, I think 26 raised beds, and they're roughly 3 by 5 feet. That is a lot of space that really hasn't produced much in the last few years. They have a few beds planted up. 1 bed is planted with rhubarb, 2 with strawberries that have never flowered, and that tells us that the soil is not great. They've also become completely overrun with really nasty weeds, rhizomatous weeds that spread under the ground, and I've spent some time over the last season trying to clear those beds, and after a few weeks the weeds keep coming back. So I did a good start last year. I think 10 to 12 of these beds I had cleared at least once. Some of them I've cleared twice, and I'm going to start right away when the ground thaws working through those beds again. And eventually you're going to get all of the roots. It's just going to take some time. They've definitely weakened, and I definitely have about half of the beds that I haven't touched yet that I still need to work through. But I would like to get at least half of those beds producing something this year. And if I can get those beds growing food, I should have enough for some of the school community, some local people in need, and hopefully, if I do it right, I'll have a little bit for myself too. Now, I'm not counting on being able to keep a lot of this produce for myself, but I would like to donate most of that to the school community. I'm really just counting on if there's an excess of something, then I will take advantage of that. But we have so many local veggie farmers in the community that I know use organic practices, whether or not they are actually certified organic. I trust them, I know them personally. I can get my veggies from them. And the reason that I'm going to do that instead of growing veggies here myself is that I was selling out of flowers at the farmer's market last year. And that is great, but I don't want to be sold out. I want to have more than I need. I want to have enough so that I never sell out. So I'm going to use every space that I have this year, plant flowers. Now I do have some small herb gardens, some that are perennial. I can plant a few things in pots, but I had 1 complete growing space that was 100% vegetables that I'm going to be switching over to flowers this year. Now my other really big challenge this year is to completely develop, hopefully, my front yard and get rid of all the grass. It's not even nice grass, it's mostly just weeds, and I've had this dream for the last few years to completely eliminate the grass and develop a drought-tolerant landscape with pathways. I'd love to have sections for perennial herbs, hardy succulents, grasses, shrubs, and hopefully try to incorporate some food. I mean, the herbs will do that, but if I can hide other edible things, maybe some berry bushes, as well as a large amount of perennial cut flowers. I'd love this to be a really nice, productive landscape, but not look like a farm. I really want it to look beautiful. The idea, though, is to try to develop it so that I don't need to water anything. So I'll be choosing drought-tolerant things that are farthest away from the house, and anything that needs a little more maintenance or higher water content, I'm going to bring up closer so that it's easier to do that. I also like to grow some specialty things, and the one I had success with this year is the Meconopsis, the blue Himalayan poppy. I grew Bailey-eye and I grew Lingholm, I think, and I had success with, I think, the Bailey-eye flowered this past year. But I have more planted, I have some seedlings downstairs growing right now, and I have a whole bunch more seeds to start, including seeds that I managed to save. I had such success with that this year that I actually managed to get seed from a couple of the flowers, so that was very exciting. But what I'm fighting with right now is the fact that when we first moved here, I got really excited as a novice gardener, dug up some grass, stuffed some plants in, and that's it. I didn't really work on the soil, and our soil is fairly heavy clay. So all of the dumping compost on top and mulching, and you trust that that's going to work itself into the soil. And sometimes it does, but our heavy clay soil has not really allowed that to happen. When I go and dig now, it's very much in obvious layers. It's nice dark soil on top, about this much, and then there's a very distinct line where it's still that orangey clay underneath. It hasn't worked in. So unfortunately, I think what I'm going to have to do is dig up all the plants, actually dig the soil over, incorporating some compost, some loam. I have a little bit of both out back. But the benefit of that is a good thorough weeding. I can plant a lot of bulbs in the fall. I can move everything and give it a bit more of a design, because I didn't really do that either. It's another thing that happens when you're a novice gardener, is you just buy plants and you just stick them wherever you find space. But I'll actually try to take the time to come up with a bit of a plan, a nice design. And I have started to think about exactly what I want, and I'll be sharing that more in the coming season. So now that that is done, I can turn my attention to the rest of the front yard, and that's going to be my early spring work. There's not a ton of gardening you can do in early spring, but I can start digging up grass and then fixing up that soil before I just get overexcited and plant things in it. So we're going to leave the front yard for now. There'll be a lot more to come on that. And go into the back where I've had most of my production space for the last 5 or 6 years. I have 2 main growing spaces in the back, and my favorite one is what I call the greenhouse garden. We put in this beautiful little greenhouse. It's 6 by 9 feet. We put it in the fall of 2019, just in time for the lockdowns that ended up happening only a few months later. That was perfect timing. So when we put in this greenhouse, it was all grass around it. There was nothing there. It was basically gravel that somebody had grassed over, put an inch or 2 maybe of topsoil and then grass seed. You couldn't dig, so I had to go up with cardboard and soil we brought in. We put in these nice paths and some raised beds, and it is an amazing space. Still a little bit of finishing work to do. And I actually did a video just on building the greenhouse. So I'll link that at the end of this video if you want to watch that one, because I do get a lot of questions on our little greenhouse. We built it ourselves with windows from our neighbor. So yeah, that's been 5.5 years. Yeah, and it's still standing strong, and I absolutely love it. Around the greenhouse, we have 7 in-ground rows. I have 8 smaller raised beds that are 3 by 5 and 4 larger raised beds that are, I think, 4 by 8. And I like to plant a lot of earlier spring blooming things in this garden, like larkspur, sweet william, rudbeckia. There's a lot of that perennial stuff. I've got a lot of daffodils overwintering there. So in this garden is going to be my spring garden. I'm going to fill in all the empty spaces with ranunculus. I didn't plant tulips here this year because I've had tulips in this area in the last few years, but there's a lot of perennials and things in the larger raised beds that are just serving as holding beds right now. Most of this area is full. I think I have 3 empty in-ground rows that are going to be ranunculus. I might have 2 empty raised beds that, oh, maybe some snapdragons. I do have some of those planted in the front yard, but I do use a lot of snapdragons. So most of that is planting for May and June cut flowers. And then in the upper garden, which is completely empty right now, except for some columbine, some aquilegia, and a few delphiniums that are eventually going to get moved. Other than those, it's completely empty. And that is going to be my warm season crops. So the zinnias and the sunflowers I've already taken care of, but if I want more, that's what these rows are going to be for. And the rest of the space will be things like celosia, amaranth, marigolds is a good one, cosmos, ornamental grasses, all those things that I use for filler. Bupleurum is a filler I use a lot, and auric as well. Those are things that easily seed themselves, and they tend to come up well before your last frost date too. So if I don't have room in the lower garden, they'll go up here. But those are also things that look good in ornamental beds. So in my borders, which don't have a lot of space in the middle, that's something that I can put in there just to fill in space. So I think I will leave it at that. There will be a lot more detail on this coming soon, but for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.